What's up, guys? Jumbo Prey here, of course, and thank you for joining me for this week's edition of PLO Tips for Busy Grinders number 38, and only the last couple have been done via video. So, of course, reach out, let me know if you like the new format, and even send me a hand history, and you might be included in the next one. But for today, what we're going to go over is a hand that I saw on the 2+2 forums, okay? And in this specific hand, the relevant reads on the players are that the big blind or the opener, as you'll see, in a live straddling game has a massive stack, is on a big heater. A competent reg or a pro has 60 big blinds and is in the hijack, and a half-stacking button player who we have no reads on is on the button. And we have Queen Jack 10-3 with a suit in the cutoff. Beautiful hand. Just quality starting hand here. Now, let's run through the action here. So under the gun, in the actual hand, it was a 1-2-5 game with a straddle, but for purposes of, what Poker Juice is capable of, I decided to put the action this way because it doesn't make so much of a difference. So under the gun opens for 25. The hijack or middle position player calls. We call in the cutoff with Queen Jack 10-3 with a suit. The button player calls and we see a flop. Now, it might look horrible for the button to be calling here. Well, I mean, not horrible, but the thing is you have to remember he's actually the button straddle in this hand, so he's going to be calling with anything. What's more important here is our preflop call. Now, this is not a good preflop call. I don't know how clear that is to everyone, but although Queen Jack 10 has a lot of good multi-way value in terms of straight making capability, our flush is going to be covered more than half the time, generally in four-way pots, at least a third of the time for sure, depending on the board. And it's just a hand where it's difficult to value bet most flops, and it's also easy to get free rolled. Free rolling gets mattered less because stacks are a little bit shallower. But here, this is just a bad call. Don't call it this hand. A situation where I might consider calling it is if we're in the big blind and we're closing the action and we're getting a good price and we have good relative position on the other players. But here, definitely fold pre. So not sure what we're doing there, but maybe we had some type of plan for the hand that I'm not thinking of. Flop comes ace jack deuce, 2 hearts. We flop middle pair with a nut gutter. The flop checks through. So here's where the hand gets interesting. Under the gun checks, middle position, the competent player bets 100. We decide to call, and everyone else folds. Now, the main question here is, should we raise or should we call? I'm fine with calling, I think. A couple of important things to think about. The most important being that the flop checked through, meaning that I'm not particularly concerned with giving people a free look at boat outs. I think that the main concern is giving people a free look at flush draw outs. Moreover, so really you're hoping that the competent player ends up barreling off because we're underrepresenting our range, which I think is a possibility. Another important question is, how would the competent player play ace-king? How would the competent player play king-jack? Those types of hands. Now, you notice that I'm not just immediately putting sets into their range for a couple of reasons. The most important being that given our player reads that the under-the-gun player is a fish on a heater, essentially, and that the hijack player is a competent player, you have to imagine that almost all of his aces combos he would have 3-bet preflop. A lot of his kings combos he would have 3-bet preflop. So the stronger pieces of his range he really should have been 3-betting. So it really makes his range very wide, and it makes our hand pretty invulnerable to that. All we're really, for the most part, scared of is flush draws and perhaps ace-king. Ace-jack would have definitely led the flop. So you're really I think that calling is a good play, and I think that looking to bluff him off of a chop is likewise is a valid option. I'm also not concerned. I mean, if the other players in the pot want to come along, that's fine. We're going to get more value out of our hand. We have pretty clear visibility on the river. It's not like we're going to be put in tough spots. It'd be a little bit closer if we had a hand like King Jack, for example, I think that would be more of a difficult call because we're sort of like at the bottom of our range rather than the top. But this is nice because we have some protection on the river. So the river comes to jack and our opponent checks, and we're deciding whether to value bet or not. Or we're deciding whether, in the actual post, he's deciding to bluff our opponent off of queen 10. Now, I actually think that that's a pretty valid play. Now, the most important thing to think about in this hand is whether our opponent would bet king jack on the turn or ace king. And certainly, like, if he's going to call ace king. And another important question is, do we ever get bluffed by betting? Now, when you're faced in river situations, especially against competent players, the most important question you need to ask is, what does my hand look like? Because good players, good competent players, that's actually what they care about. They care a lot less about what their hand is. They care a lot more about what it is your hand looks like. So in this case, I think that our hand looks a lot like it could be king jack. It could be a set of kings easily. And again, like, I'm not necessarily worried about, you can really discount aces full or kings full from his range. If he has a full house, it's going to be king jack. Some random jack deuce, I guess, but I think that realistically, if you ran into ace jack or king jack, it'd be a bad beat. I think most of those combos would have just led the flop from a competent player. So that being said, if you're not concerned for running into a boat and you're not concerned about getting bluffed, then I think that betting is a pretty good option. I'm curious what we did in the hand. Again, in these river spots, for people who get to these close river spots, I'll give you a couple of good rules of thumb. The first being, if you're playing weaker players, certainly err on the side of value betting thinly. The fact of the matter is, weaker players, they just don't bluff enough on the river. So you don't have to really be concerned about getting bluffed off of the best hand. And as a general rule of thumb, if you're not value betting thin enough, or if you're not value owning yourself on the river at least some of the time, then you're really not value betting thin enough in general. But if you're facing competent opponents, if it's really close, I opt to check just because competent opponents will bluff rivers. So in these types of spots, I generally don't bet the river unless I plan on bet calling if I'm against someone who's particularly aggressive. The more aggressive someone is, the stronger your polarizing range needs to be. So thanks for checking out the video. Write in the comments on YouTube if you have any feedback or you want to talk about the hand more. And if you have any other questions, anything PLO related, feel free to hit me up, John at PLOquickpro.com. Thanks.